David Rourke knelt beside the makeshift shelter, watching his student Jake fumble with the tarp corners. The November air bit through his jacket, but he stayed patient. Teaching survival skills meant letting people fail first. "Tie it tight," David said. "Wind won't care about your feelings." Jake grunted, pulling the rope harder. At 38, David had taught hundreds of people to survive in the Georgia mountains. Most came back grateful. Some came back changed. All learned that nature didn't negotiate. His phone buzzed against his hip. David ignored it. Rule 1 of wilderness training: no phones during instruction. The mountains demanded full attention. The phone buzzed again. "Sir." Jake looked up from his knots. "You gonna answer that?" David pulled out his phone. 2 missed calls from home. His stomach tightened. Amelia never called during his classes unless something was wrong. He saw the voicemail notification and pressed play. Lily's voice crackled through the speaker, small and terrified. "Daddy, help. Mommy locked me in." Static filled the air. Then nothing. David's blood turned to ice. His 5-year-old daughter's voice echoed in his head, that desperate cry for help. The phone slipped from his hand, hitting the forest floor. "Jake, pack it up. Now." "But we're not done." "Now." David sprinted toward his truck, branches whipping past his face. 20 minutes back to town. Too long. Way too long. His boots pounded against the trail, every step feeling like running through quicksand. He yanked open the truck door and gunned the engine. The tires spun on the dirt road before finding grip. David floored it down the mountain, his hands gripping the wheel, so tight his knuckles went white. "Mommy locked me in." The words played over and over in his head. Locked her in where? Why? Amelia had been acting strange lately, distant and jumpy. But she would never hurt Lily. Never. David took the curves too fast, the truck sliding on loose gravel. His phone sounded in the passenger seat, silent now. He grabbed it and tried calling home. Straight to voicemail. He tried Amelia's cell. Voicemail. Come on, he muttered, pressing harder on the gas. The mountain road stretched forever. Every second felt like an hour. David's army training kicked in. Control your breathing. Assess the situation. Act with purpose. But this wasn't a mission. This was his daughter. He reached for his phone again and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is David Rourke. I think something's wrong at my house. My daughter called for help. What's your address, sir? David gave them the address on Pine Ridge Road. I'm 20 minutes out. Can you send someone to check? We'll dispatch a unit right away. Are you safe to drive? I'm fine. David wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. He ended the call and pressed harder on the gas. The truck engine roared as he flew down the winding road. Pine trees blurred past the windows. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Maybe Lily got stuck somewhere in the house. Maybe she was playing and Amelia didn't hear her. Maybe the call got cut off and everything was fine. But Lily's voice didn't sound like she was playing. She sounded scared. David rounded the final curve before town. In the distance, he could see smoke rising above the tree line. Black smoke, thick and heavy. His heart hammered against his ribs. Please let it be someone else's house. Please let it be anywhere but Pine Ridge Road. David's truck crested the hill, and his world collapsed. Fire trucks lined Pine Ridge Road. Hoses snaked across the pavement like thick black veins. His house, his home where Lily slept every night, was a wall of orange flames reaching toward the sky. He slammed on the brakes and jumped out before the truck stopped rolling. The heat hit him like a physical blow, scorching his face even from 50 yards away. Neighbors stood in clusters, their faces lit by the fire's glow. Lily. David ran toward the house. Lily. A firefighter in full gear stepped in front of him, arms spread wide. Sir, you can't go in there. That's my house. My daughter's inside. We've already searched. Nobody's in there. David tried to push past him. You're wrong. She called me 20 minutes ago. 2 more firefighters moved to help restrain him. David fought against their grip, his eyes fixed on the flames eating through his daughter's bedroom window. Sir, calm down, the first firefighter said. What's your name? David Rourke. This is my house. My 5-year-old daughter, Lily, lives here. The firefighter's expression softened. I'm Captain Morris. We did a full sweep when we arrived. The house was empty. She was here. David pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Listen to this. He played Lily's voicemail. The firefighters exchanged glances. When did you receive this? Captain Morris asked. 30 minutes ago. Maybe 35. And where were you? Teaching a survival class up on Bear Mountain. Captain Morris nodded to one of his men, who spoke into his radio. David couldn't make out the words over the roar of flames and rushing water. Mr. Rourke, is your wife home? I don't know. She should be. Amelia, that's my wife. She worked from home most days. David looked around frantically. The crowd of neighbors watched him with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Mrs. Patterson from next door caught his eye. Emma. He jogged over to her. Did you see Amelia and Lily leave? Mrs. Patterson shook her head, her gray hair wild from the wind. I saw smoke around 3:30. Called the fire department right away. But I didn't see anyone come out. You didn't see them leave earlier? No, honey. I've been working in my garden all afternoon. I would have noticed. David's chest felt tight. If they didn't leave, and they weren't inside when the fire started, where were they? Captain Morris approached. Mr. Rourke, we need to ask you some questions. Have you found them? Not yet, but we've called in additional search teams. Can you tell me about any recent problems at home? Arguments, threats, anything unusual? David stared at the flames. His mind felt sluggish, like thinking through mud. Amelia's been stressed lately. Work stuff, but nothing serious. Any financial troubles? No more than anyone else. Has your wife mentioned taking your daughter anywhere today? David shook his head. She would have told me, and Lily would have been excited. She tells me everything. The roof of his house groaned and collapsed inward, sending sparks shooting into the darkening sky. David watched his daughter's bedroom disappear into the flames. Her stuffed animals, her books, her drawings taped to the wall, all gone. Mr. Rourke, Captain Morris touched his shoulder. Is there somewhere else your wife might have taken your daughter? Family, friends. Amelia doesn't have family nearby. Her mother lives in Atlanta, but they don't get along. What about friends? David tried to think. Amelia had acquaintances from work, but no close friends. She preferred staying home with Lily. Said other people were too complicated. I don't think so, he said finally. His phone rang. David grabbed it, hoping to see Amelia's name. Instead, it was his sister Tessa. David, oh my God, I just heard. Are you okay? They're gone, Tessa. Lily and Amelia. Nobody knows where they are. What do you mean gone? David explained about the voicemail, the fire, the empty house. Tessa listened without interrupting. I'm driving up from Atlanta right now, she said. Have you called Dad? Not yet. I'll call him. David, listen to me. They're going to be okay. There's an explanation for this. David wanted to believe her. But standing there watching his life burn, nothing felt okay. A deputy sheriff walked over, notebook in hand. David recognized him, Elgin Wade, a guy he'd known since high school. David. Elgin's voice was carefully neutral. I need to get a statement from you. Have you found them? Not yet, but we got people looking. Elgin flipped open his notebook. Tell me about this morning. What time did you leave for work? Around 7. Lily was still sleeping. Amelia made me coffee. How did she seem? David thought back. Amelia had been quiet at breakfast, but that wasn't unusual lately. She'd kissed him goodbye and told him to be careful on the mountain roads. Normal, he said. Maybe a little tired. Any arguments recently? No. David looked at Elgin sharply. Why are you asking me this? Just trying to get a complete picture. Elgin made a note. Have you tried calling her cell? Goes straight to voicemail. We've pinged her phone. Last location was here at the house around 2 this afternoon. 2 hours before the fire started. David's mind raced through possibilities. If Amelia's phone was at the house at 2, but she and Lily weren't here when the fire started, maybe someone took them, David said. Elgin wrote something down. Any reason someone would want to hurt your family? No. Everyone loves Lily. And Amelia keeps to herself mostly. What about your business? Any unhappy customers? Disputes over money? David shook his head. People pay me to teach them skills that might save their lives. They don't usually complain. The fire was finally under control, but the house was a total loss. Charred beams jutted up like broken bones. The smell of smoke and melted plastic hung heavy in the air. David. He turned to see his father's truck pulling up. Grady Rourke climbed out, his weathered face grim. At 72, the old man still moved like the Marine he'd been 50 years ago. Son, Grady pulled David into a bear hug. Tessa told me. Any word? Nothing. Grady looked at the smoking ruins of the house. We'll find them. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. Grady Rourke didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Deputy Wade closed his notebook. David, I need you to come to the station tomorrow morning. We'll have more questions once the fire marshal finishes his investigation. What kind of questions? Standard procedure in cases like this. David didn't like the sound of that. Cases like what? Elgin met his eyes. House fires where residents are missing. David spent the night at his father's house, staring at the ceiling and checking his phone every few minutes. No calls, no texts, no word from Amelia or about Lily. Tessa arrived around midnight with a bag of clothes and a grim expression. She hugged David without saying anything. Sometimes silence was better than empty words. At 6 in the morning, David's phone rang. He answered before the first ring finished. Mr. Rourke? This is Deputy Wade. We need you to come to the hospital. David's heart stopped. Did you find them? Your wife is here. She's asking for you. David was dressed and in his truck in under 2 minutes. Grady and Tessa followed in the old man's pickup. The hospital was only 10 minutes away, but David ran 3 red lights getting there. He burst through the emergency room doors and found Elgin waiting. Where is she? David demanded. Room 3. But David, I need to warn you. David pushed past him and yanked open the door to room 3. Amelia sat on the examination table wearing a hospital gown. Purple bruises covered her arms and neck. Her lip was split, and her left eye was swollen shut. Oh my God! David rushed to her side. What happened? Where's Lily? Amelia flinched when he reached for her. Don't touch me. David stopped, confused. Amelia, it's me. You're safe now. She looked at him with her good eye, and David saw something that made his blood freeze. Fear. She was afraid of him. Where's Lily? He asked again. Amelia's face crumpled. I don't know. We got separated. Separated how? What happened? A doctor entered the room, a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders. Mr. Rourke? I'm Dr. Patel. Your wife has been through a traumatic experience. She needs rest. I need to know where my daughter is. Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Amelia's voice was stronger now. He needs to hear this. She turned to David, and he saw hatred in her expression. Actual hatred. I was trying to take Lily and leave. I couldn't live with the violence anymore. David felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. What violence? Amelia, what are you talking about? Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Amelia's voice shook. I was packing our things when you came home early. You were furious. You said if I tried to leave, you'd make sure I never saw Lily again. That's not true. I was teaching a class all day. You locked us in Lily's room. Then you started the fire. David stared at his wife in disbelief. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Amelia, I got your call Lily's call while I was on the mountain. I drove straight home and found the house already burning. Liar. The word hit him like a physical blow. David looked around the room, seeing doubt in Dr. Patel's eyes, suspicion in Deputy Wade's posture. I would never hurt Lily. You know that. I know what you did to us. Amelia touched her bruised face. I managed to get away when the smoke got thick. But Lily, she started crying. I couldn't find her. The smoke was everywhere. I called for her, but I couldn't see anything. David's world tilted sideways. His wife was accusing him of attempted murder, of trying to kill their daughter. This is insane. Amelia, tell them the truth. I'm telling the truth. Deputy Wade stepped forward. Mr. Rourke, I think you should come with me. What? We need to discuss some inconsistencies in your story. David looked at Amelia one more time. The woman he'd loved for 8 years, the mother of his child, stared back at him like he was a monster. I didn't do this, he said quietly. Amelia turned away. The interrogation room of the sheriff's department smelled like stale coffee and fear. David sat across from Deputy Wade and a state police detective named Reynolds, a thin woman with sharp eyes and no patience for small talk. Let's go through your timeline again, Detective Reynolds said. David had already told the story 3 times. I left home at 7, drove to Bear Mountain, started my wilderness class at 9, got Lily's call around 3:15, drove straight home and found the fire. Anyone verify you were on the mountain all day? My student, Jake Morrison, the guy who called to book the class originally. Detective Reynolds made note. We'll check that out. Have you found any sign of Lily? We're still searching. Wade leaned forward. David, your wife says you've been violent before. Is that true? No, never. She mentioned incidents going back months. Pushing, grabbing, threats. David felt like he was drowning. That never happened. I've never laid a hand on either of them. People saw you fighting with the firefighters yesterday, Detective Reynolds said. Pretty aggressive behavior. My house was burning down. I thought my daughter was inside. But she wasn't inside, was she? David stared at her. What are you implying? I'm asking where she was, if not in the house. I don't know. That's what I've been telling you. Detective Reynolds exchanged a look with Wade. Mr. Rourke, we're placing you under arrest for arson and suspected murder. The words hit David like a sledgehammer. Murder? You haven't even found a body. Your daughter is missing and presumed dead. Your wife barely escaped with her life. And you were the only one with motive and opportunity. What motive? Your wife was leaving you. Taking your daughter. That's a pretty strong motive for some men. David stood up so fast his chair fell over. I would die before I hurt Lily. Sit down, Mr. Rourke. 2 officers appeared at the door. David realized he was shaking not from fear, but from rage. Someone had destroyed his family and was trying to pin it on him. I want a lawyer, he said. Smart choice. They read him his rights and led him to a cell. David sat on the narrow cot and tried to make sense of what was happening. Yesterday morning, he'd kissed his wife goodbye and listened to his daughter giggle about something on TV. Now Amelia was accusing him of trying to murder them both. The Amelia he knew wouldn't lie about something like this. She was honest to a fault, almost painfully truthful. If she said he'd been violent, she believed it. But David knew with absolute certainty that he'd never hurt her or threatened her, which meant someone had convinced her he was dangerous. Or someone was forcing her to lie. 48 hours later, David's court-appointed lawyer got him released. The state didn't have enough evidence to hold him, no body, no physical evidence linking him to the fire, and Jake Morrison confirmed David had been on the mountain when the fire started. But the damage was done. Word had spread through their small town like wildfire. David Rourke burned down his own house and murdered his daughter. Some people believed it. Others weren't sure. Nobody wanted to take chances. Grady and Tessa picked him up from the jail in silence. David stared out the window as they drove through town. People on the sidewalks turned to stare. A few pointed. It'll blow over, Tessa said finally. Will it? People know you, David. They know you'd never hurt Lily. But David wasn't sure that mattered anymore. Perception was becoming reality, and the perception was that he was a child killer. They drove to Grady's house on the outskirts of town. The old man had converted his garage into a guest room years ago, back when David was going through his divorce from his first wife. Now it would serve as a safe house while David figured out how to prove his innocence. We need to find them, David said as they pulled into the driveway. Find who? Tessa asked. Lily and whoever took her. Because somebody did. Lily's alive out there somewhere. And I'm going to find her. Grady killed the engine and turned around. How do you know she's alive? Because I have to believe it. Because if I don't, David's voice trailed off. If Lily was dead, he might as well be. 2.3 days later, Tessa knocked on the garage door with coffee and bad news. Amelia filed for a restraining order, she said, handing David a manila envelope. You can't go within 500 feet of her. David read through the legal papers. Amelia claimed he'd been stalking her, calling her, threatening her through intermediaries. All lies, but the judge had signed the order anyway. There's more, Tessa said. She's staying with her mother in Atlanta. Gave an interview to Channel 5 News. David's stomach dropped. What kind of interview? Tessa pulled out her phone and showed him the video. Amelia sat in a tasteful living room, her bruises covered with makeup but still visible. She wore a conservative black dress and spoke in a quiet, controlled voice. I should have left sooner, she was saying. The signs were all there. The anger, the control, the threats. But I kept thinking he would change. I kept thinking about how much Lily loved her daddy. The interviewer, A blonde woman with sympathetic eyes leaned forward. What finally made you decide to leave? You said if I ever tried to take Lily away from him, he'd kill us both. I knew he meant it. David felt sick. Amelia was a convincing liar because she seemed to believe every word. Her pain was real, even if the story wasn't. I've been working on something, Tessa said, taking back her phone. Following the money. What money? Amelia's been moving cash around. Small amounts, but consistent. I used to work in banking, remember? I know how to spot patterns. Tessa pulled out a folder full of printed bank statements. David didn't ask how she'd gotten them. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of highlighted entries. Every 2 weeks for the past 3 months. $500 transferred from your joint account to a personal account I didn't recognize. David studied the numbers. That's $2,400. Gone. And look at this 3 days before the fire. She transferred $15,000 from your savings account to the same personal account. $15,000? We don't have $15,000 in savings. You did. Amelia liquidated your emergency fund and some investments. David felt anger building in his chest. Where did the money go? Tessa flipped the page. That's where it gets interesting. The personal account belongs to a man named Lyndon Harrow. He's a contractor from Athens, Georgia. David had never heard the name. Why would Amelia be giving money to a contractor? Good question. I did some digging. Lyndon Harrow, 32, owns a small construction company. No criminal record, but his business license was suspended last year for shoddy work. So he needed money. Exactly. And your wife had money to give him. David stared at the bank statements. This was the first piece of real evidence that something bigger was happening. Amelia hadn't just accused him of violence. She'd been planning something for months. There's more, Tessa said. I found his address. She handed David a slip of paper with an address in Athens, about 2 hours south. David memorized it and handed the paper back. What are you thinking? Tessa asked. David was thinking about Lily's voice on that voicemail, about his daughter calling for help while someone not him locked her in somewhere, about his wife's convenient appearance at the hospital with fresh bruises and a perfect story. I'm thinking Amelia is not the victim here, he said. So what do we do? David stood up and grabbed his jacket. We find out what Lyndon Harrow knows about my daughter. David, you can't just drive down there and confront this guy. If you're right, and he's involved in whatever happened to Lily, approaching him directly could put her in more danger. David stopped at the door. Tessa was right, but every minute that passed was another minute Lily was out there somewhere, scared and alone. Then what do you suggest? We watch him first. See where he goes, who he talks to. Build a case. While Lily stays missing. While we make sure we don't make things worse. David wanted to argue, but his sister was the smart one in the family. Always had been. If she said to wait and watch, he'd wait and watch. For now, David borrowed Tessa's Honda and swapped the license plates with ones from a junk car behind Grady's barn. If he was going to follow Lyndon Harrow, he couldn't risk being recognized. Athens, Georgia was 2 hours of winding mountain roads and interstate highway. David drove south with the radio off, thinking about Lily. Was she scared? Hurt? Did she know her daddy was looking for her? He found Lyndon's address in a rundown neighborhood near the university. Cheap apartments and rental houses filled with college students who couldn't afford better. David parked across the street and waited at 8:11 in the morning. A man emerged from apartment 2B. Late 20s, thin build, nervous energy. He climbed into a beat-up Ford pickup truck with construction equipment in the back. David followed at a distance as the truck wound through Athens traffic. Lyndon drove like a man with nowhere important to be slow, distracted, stopping for coffee at a gas station. After 20 minutes, they were outside town heading toward the national forest. The road got narrower and more isolated. David hung back further, using his military training to stay invisible. The truck turned onto a dirt road marked with a "No Trespassing" sign. David waited 5 minutes, then followed. Tire tracks led through dense pine forest for about a mile before reaching a small clearing that a rustic cabin sat in the center, maybe 800 square feet with a metal roof and wraparound porch. Lyndon's truck was parked out front, but David couldn't see the man anywhere. David left his car hidden in the trees and approached on foot. The cabin looked lived in, but temporary, like a hunting lodge someone was using for a few weeks. Smoke rose from the chimney, but he crept closer, staying in the tree line. Through the front window, he could see Lyndon moving around inside. The man seemed agitated, pacing back and forth while talking on his phone. David circled to the back of the cabin. A small bedroom window faced the forest. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap he could see through. His heart stopped. Children's drawings were taped to the walls. Crayon pictures of houses and trees and stick-figure families. In the corner, a pink shoe lay on its side, next to a small pile of clothes. Lily's shoe. He'd bought her those shoes for her first day of kindergarten. David's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. The shoe, the drawings, anything that might prove his daughter had been here. The back door of the cabin opened and Lyndon stepped out, still talking on his phone. "I know what we agreed," Lyndon was saying, "but this is getting too complicated. What if someone finds her?" David pressed himself against the cabin wall and strained to hear. "Yeah, I get it, but keeping a kid this long wasn't part of the deal." Lyndon paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "Fine, 2 more weeks. But after that, I'm done. This is too risky." He ended the call and went back inside. David waited until he heard the TV turn on, then continued his circle around the cabin. The front porch had a wooden table with a newspaper folded on top. David crept up the steps and checked the date yesterday's paper. Someone was definitely living here. He peered through the front window again. Lyndon sat on a couch watching TV, but David could see part of another room through an open doorway. A child's bed with pink sheets. Lily's bed. David's training told him to retreat, call for backup, approach this systematically. But his father's instinct screamed at him to kick down the door and find his daughter. He compromised. Moving quickly but quietly, he planted a small listening device under the porch table. The bug was military-grade, something Grady had kept from his Marine days. It would pick up conversations inside the cabin and transmit them to David's phone. 20 minutes later, David was back in his car heading north. Lily was alive. She was in that cabin, and she was alive. Now he had to prove it. David drove straight back to his father's house and called a family meeting. Grady and Tessa listened without interruption as he described the cabin, the children's drawings, and Lyndon's phone conversation. "We call the police," Tessa said immediately. "With what evidence?" David asked. "Pictures of a shoe and some drawings." Lyndon could say any kid left those there. "But you heard him talking about keeping someone for 2 more weeks. "I heard him talking about keeping her for 2 more weeks. Could be anyone." Grady leaned back in his chair. "What are you thinking, son?" "I'm thinking we need more evidence before we involve the law. If we spook Lyndon, he might move Lily somewhere we can't find her. Or worse," Tessa said quietly. David had thought about that possibility during the drive home. If Lyndon panicked, if he decided Lily was too much of a liability. "That's why we have to be smart about this," David said. "I planted a bug at the cabin. We listen, we record, we build a case that even the most skeptical cop can't ignore. And then we get my daughter back." Grady stood up and walked to his gun cabinet. "I've got surveillance equipment from my security business days. Cameras, recording devices, night vision gear. Dad, we're not going to war, aren't we?" The old man turned around, his eyes hard. "Someone took your little girl and tried to frame you for murder. Seems like war to me." David couldn't argue with that logic. They spent the next hour planning. Tessa would continue following the money trail, looking for connections between Amelia and Lyndon. Grady would use his contacts in law enforcement to quietly investigate Lyndon's background. David would monitor the bug and plan a reconnaissance mission back to the cabin. "There's something else," Tessa said as they finished. "I did some research on Amelia's family while you were gone." She pulled out her laptop and showed them a news article from 5 years ago. The headline read, "Atlanta socialite's daughter accused in domestic violence case." David read the article twice. Amelia had been arrested for assaulting her then-boyfriend with a kitchen knife. The charges were dropped after the victim recanted his story and left town suddenly. "Her mother paid him off," Tessa said. "Claudette Sinclair has serious money and a reputation to protect. She's done this before." "Done what?" "Cleaned up Amelia's messes. There are 3 other incidents I found that charges disappeared. witnesses who changed their stories, prosecutors who suddenly lost interest in cases. David stared at his wife's mugshot on the laptop screen. She looked different, somehow harder, more calculating. Not the gentle woman who sang lullabies to Lily every night. You think Amelia planned all this? I think Amelia is capable of a lot more than we gave her credit for. That night, David lay awake listening to the audio feed from the cabin. Most of it was television noise and Lyndon moving around. But at 10:30, Lyndon made another phone call. "It's me," he said. "Yeah, she's fine. Watching movies, eating cereal. Kids are resilient, you know?" David's hands clenched into fists. Lyndon was talking about Lily like she was a pet. "I know what you said about keeping her happy," Lyndon continued. "But she keeps asking for her daddy. What am I supposed to tell her?" The voice on the other end was too faint for the bug to pick up clearly. "Yeah, okay. 2 more weeks. But I want the rest of my money up front. This wasn't supposed to go on this long." More conversation David couldn't hear. "Fine. But after this is over, I'm disappearing for a while. This town's getting too hot." Lyndon ended the call. David lay in the dark, processing what he'd heard. Someone was paying Lyndon to keep Lily. Someone who had a plan that required 2 more weeks. 2 weeks for what? The answer came the next morning in the form of legal papers delivered by a process server. Amelia was suing David for emotional distress, wrongful death, and claiming full posthumous custody of Lily's estate. Posthumous custody? David read the documents twice. She's declaring Lily dead. Tessa looked over his shoulder. And claiming you're responsible. If she wins, she gets everything: life insurance, your business, any assets in Lily's name. But there's no body, no proof Lily's dead. Doesn't matter. After 7 years, the courts can declare someone dead based on circumstances. But Amelia's not waiting 7 years. She's claiming the evidence is overwhelming. David studied the lawsuit. Amelia's lawyer was expensive, the kind of attorney who charged $1,000 an hour and won cases through intimidation and connections. Where did she get money for a lawyer like this? Her mother, Tessa said. Claudette Sinclair is backing this play. The lawsuit painted David as a violent husband who'd murdered his daughter in a fit of rage, then burned down the house to cover up the crime. It cited his history of aggression and documented threats against his family. None of it was true, but it was written with the kind of legal precision that made lies sound like facts. "They're moving fast," David said. "Why? Because they know something we don't. Or because they're running out of time." David thought about Lyndon's phone call. 2 more weeks. Whatever Amelia and her mother were planning, it had a deadline. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking for what you won't find." David showed the message to Tessa. "Someone's watching us. Or someone's scared." That afternoon, David drove back to the cabin. He parked further away this time and approached through the forest. The bug was still transmitting, but he wanted to see the place in daylight. The cabin looked different during the day, shabbier, more temporary. Lyndon's truck was gone, but smoke still rose from the chimney. Someone was inside. David crept to the bedroom window and peered through the gap in the curtains. Lily sat on the small bed, coloring in a book. She looked thin but unhurt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore clothes David didn't recognize: his daughter. Alive and only 50 feet away, David's first instinct was to break the window and grab her. But Lyndon could return any minute. And if David was wrong about being able to prove this legally, he took pictures through the window, making sure to capture Lily's face clearly. Then he retreated to the trees and called Tessa. "I see her," he whispered. "She's in the cabin right now. Is she okay?" "She looks fine. Scared maybe, but not hurt." "Where's Lyndon?" "Gone. But I don't know for how long." David watched the cabin for another hour. Lily moved from the bed to a small table where she ate lunch from paper plate. Someone had left sandwiches and juice boxes for her. Tea 3 o'clock. Lyndon's truck pulled into the clearing. David retreated deeper into the forest, but kept watching. Lyndon went inside and emerged 20 minutes later with a garbage bag. He threw in the back of his truck and drove away again. David waited until the engine noise faded, then approached the cabin. The garbage bag was gone, but he could see fresh tire tracks in the mud. Lyndon was being careful about disposal, no evidence left behind. The bug picked up audio from inside the cabin. Lily's voice, faint but clear. When is Daddy coming to get me? No answer. She was alone in there. David's phone buzzed with another text. Last warning. This time, David texted back, come find me. No response. That night, the bug recorded the conversation David had been waiting for. Lyndon's phone rang at 11:15. We have a problem, Lyndon said after answering. Someone's been watching the cabin. The voice on the other end was clearer, this time a woman's voice. David turned up the volume on his phone and pressed record. What do you mean watching? The woman asked. I found boot prints near the back window. Fresh ones. Someone was here today. Did you see anyone? No, but they were close enough to look inside. David's blood chilled. The woman's voice was familiar. Calm down, she continued. It could have been anyone. Hikers, hunters. This isn't a hiking trail, and hunters don't sneak around windows. What do you want me to do about it? I want out. This is getting too dangerous. You're getting paid well to handle a little danger. I didn't sign up for killing a kid. There was a long pause. When the woman spoke again, her voice was ice cold. Who said anything about killing her? You did. Last week you said. I said we'd discuss options after the insurance money clears. That's not the same thing. David's hands shook as he listened. The woman was Amelia. His wife was orchestrating this entire thing. She's not dead yet, Amelia continued. Keep her hidden. 2 more weeks. The insurance clears and we vanish. And then what happens to the kid? Then we figure out what's best for everyone. David had heard enough. He called Tessa and played her the recording. Jesus, Tessa whispered. That's really her. It's her. We have to call the police now. This is evidence of kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy. It's evidence of a phone conversation. Amelia could claim she was talking about anything, or that the recording is fake. But combined with the bank transfers and your photos of Lily, it's still not enough. We need more. David was quiet for a long moment, thinking, then he smiled grimly. What are you planning? Tessa asked. I'm going to give them something to really worry about. David spent the next morning crafting an email from Lyndon's burner phone. He'd found the number by cross-referencing the call logs with public records. The email was simple and urgent. Change of plans. Buyers want to move the package tonight. Cash only. Need to meet at the usual place by 8 p.m. He sent the email to 3 random addresses, making it look like Lyndon was panicking and sending confused messages. Then he forwarded copies to Deputy Wade with an anonymous tip. Check this out. Might be related to the missing Rourke girl. David knew Lyndon would see the forwarded email and assume someone was selling information about the kidnapping. It would force him to check on Lily and possibly move her. That's when David would be waiting. He drove to the cabin in the late afternoon and set up a surveillance position in the trees. Grady had given him military-grade night vision equipment and a camera with a telephoto lens. At T630, Lyndon's truck roared into the clearing faster than usual. The man jumped out and ran to the cabin door, his face tight with panic. David started recording as Lyndon burst inside. Through the window, he could see the man frantically talking to Lily, who looked confused and frightened. Lyndon emerged carrying a duffel bag and a small suitcase. He loaded them in his truck, then went back for Lily. David's finger hovered over the call button on his phone. If Lyndon drove away with Lily now, David might lose her forever. But if he called the police too early, they might not arrive in time to catch Lyndon with her. Lyndon appeared in the doorway, carrying Lily in his arms. She was wrapped in a blanket, and David could see her face clearly in his camera viewfinder. That's when Deputy Wade's patrol car pulled into the clearing with lights flashing. David had called in the tip 30 minutes ago, giving Wade just enough time to respond to the anonymous email about the cabin location. Lyndon froze in the doorway, still holding Lily. Wade stepped out of his patrol car with his weapon drawn, but pointed down. Set the child down and step away, Wade called out. Lyndon looked around wildly, calculating his chances. David held his breath. I said, set her down. Lyndon slowly placed Lily on the ground. She immediately ran toward the trees, toward David's hiding spot. Daddy, she screamed. Daddy, I'm here. David broke cover and ran toward her, not caring about anything except his daughter. Lily crashed into his arms, sobbing and shaking. I'm here, baby, David whispered, wrapping her in his jacket. I'm here. Nobody's taking you again. Deputy Wade had Lyndon face down in the dirt with handcuffs on. The man wasn't resisting. He looked relieved it was over. "David," Wade called out. "I need to know what you're doing here. I followed a tip about my daughter." "What kind of tip?" David pulled out his phone and played the recorded conversation between Lyndon and Amelia. Wade listened with growing amazement. "Is that my wife?" Admitting she orchestrated this whole thing. Wade looked at Lily, who was still clinging to her father. "We need to get her to a hospital. Make sure she's okay." "She's okay," David said. "Aren't you, baby?" Lily nodded against his chest. "I knew you'd find me, Daddy. I knew you'd come." At the hospital, Dr. Patel examined Lily while David held her hand. The little girl was dehydrated and underweight, but otherwise unharmed. She told the doctor about staying in the hunting cabin with the nice man who gave her coloring books. "Did anyone hurt you?" Dr. Patel asked gently. Lily shook her head. "The man said Daddy was looking for me. He said I had to stay hidden until it was safe." David's jaw tightened. Lyndon had convinced Lily she was hiding from danger, not being kidnapped. Deputy Wade interviewed Lily with a child psychologist present. She described her mother bringing her to the cabin after telling her they were going on a special adventure. "Mommy said Daddy was sick and might hurt me," Lily said. "She said I had to stay with a nice man until Daddy got better." "Did your mommy seem scared?" the psychologist asked. "A little. She had bumps on her face." David and Wade exchanged glances. The bruises Amelia had shown up with at the hospital, had she given them to herself? Lyndon, meanwhile, was talking to anyone who would listen. Faced with kidnapping charges and the possibility of life in prison, he spilled everything. Amelia had contacted him 3 months ago through a mutual acquaintance. She needed someone to help her disappear with her daughter. She claimed her husband was abusive and she feared for their lives. The plan was simple. Fake a house fire, make it look like David had killed them both, then lie low until the insurance money came through. Amelia would get the insurance payout, Lyndon would get $50,000, and they'd both start new lives somewhere far away. But she never said anything about actually hurting the kid. Lyndon insisted. "She said we were saving her from an abusive father." "What about the bruises on Mrs. Rourke?" Wade asked. "She did those herself, right before she went to the hospital. Use a phone book so they'd look real but wouldn't cause permanent damage." Wade shook his head in disgust. "And you believe her story about abuse?" "She was convincing. And the money was good." "What changed your mind?" "The kid kept asking for her daddy. Not like a scared kid, asking for protection like a kid who missed someone she loved. Made me wonder if I was on the wrong side of this thing." Amelia was arrested at her mother's mansion in Atlanta at 6 in the morning. David wasn't there to see it, but Deputy Wade described it to him later with evident satisfaction. "She answered the door in silk pajamas like she was expecting room service," Wade said. "When I told her she was under arrest for kidnapping and conspiracy to commit fraud, she actually laughed." "What did she say?" "She said we couldn't prove anything. Said Lyndon was lying to save himself." "What about the recordings?" "She claimed the voice wasn't hers. Said anyone could fake a phone call." David wasn't surprised. Amelia would fight this to the bitter end. But the evidence was overwhelming now. Lyndon's confession, the financial records Tessa had uncovered, the recorded phone calls, and most importantly, Lily's testimony about her mother bringing her to the cabin. Claudette Sinclair hired the best legal team money could buy. They argued that Amelia was a victim of domestic abuse who'd been manipulated by a criminal partner. They claimed David had orchestrated the entire kidnapping to frame his wife. But the story didn't hold up under scrutiny. David's alibi for the day of the fire was ironclad. The financial evidence showed Amelia had been planning this for months. And Lily's account of events contradicted every part of Amelia's original story. The trial lasted 3 weeks. David sat in the gallery every day, watching his wife lie under oath with the same conviction she'd once used to tell him she loved him. "I was trying to protect my daughter from a violent man," Amelia testified. "Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I trusted the wrong person. But everything I did was out of love for Lily." The prosecutor, a tough woman named Maria Santos, cross-examined Amelia without mercy. "Mrs. Rourke, you transferred $15,000 to Mr. Harrow 3 days before the fire. Was that out of love for your daughter?" "I was paying him to help us relocate safely." You gave yourself bruises with a phone book and went to the hospital claiming your husband beat you. Was that out of love? I was afraid no one would believe me without physical evidence. You let your 5-year-old daughter believe her father was dangerous and might hurt her. Was that out of love? Amelia's composure cracked for the first time. I was protecting her. From what? From a man who'd never raised a hand to either of you? From a father who loved her more than his own life? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You saw an opportunity to get rid of your husband, collect his life insurance, and start over with your mother's money. Your daughter was just a prop in your scheme. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of arson, guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. Amelia's face went white. Her expensive lawyers had prepared her for the possibility of some lesser charges, but not for complete conviction on all counts. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiff led Amelia away in handcuffs, she turned to look at David one last time. Her expression wasn't anger or regret, it was pure hatred. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. David stared back at her without blinking. As far as he was concerned, it had been over the moment she put their daughter at risk. Lyndon Harrow's trial was shorter and less dramatic. Faced with overwhelming evidence and Amelia's conviction, he pled guilty to kidnapping and conspiracy charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 15 years with the possibility of parole in 10. His lawyer argued that Lyndon had been manipulated by a master manipulator, that he genuinely believed he was helping a woman escape domestic abuse. The judge wasn't impressed. "Mr. Harrow, you held a 5-year-old child captive for weeks. Whatever you believed about her mother's situation, there is no excuse for terrorizing a child." David attended Lyndon's sentencing hearing. When it was over, Lyndon approached him in the hallway. "I know you probably can't forgive me," Lyndon said quietly, "but I want you to know I never would have hurt her. When I realized what was really happening, I was going to let her go." David looked at the man who'd held his daughter prisoner. "You were going to let her go?" "Yeah. I couldn't live with myself anymore." "But you didn't let her go. You kept her locked up until the police found her." Lyndon's face fell. "I was scared. I thought if I just followed the plan." "You thought about yourself, not about a scared little girl who wanted her daddy." David walked away without another word. Lyndon's remorse meant nothing. Actions mattered, not feelings. Claudette Sinclair tried to distance herself from her daughter's crimes, but the investigation had uncovered too much evidence of her involvement. Bank records showed she'd funded Amelia's legal defense even before the kidnapping was discovered. Phone records revealed she'd been in contact with Amelia throughout the planning stages. David sued Claudette for civil conspiracy and obstruction of justice. His lawyer argued that Claudette had used her wealth and influence to enable her daughter's criminal behavior for years. "This is a pattern," David's attorney told the jury. "Claudette Sinclair has been cleaning up her daughter's messes since Amelia was a teenager. She's paid off victims, bought silence, and corrupted the legal system to protect a dangerous woman." The civil trial was a bloodbath. Tessa had uncovered years of financial records showing Claudette's hush money payments. Former victims of Amelia's violence came forward to testify about the settlements they'd received. The jury awarded David $12 million in damages, nearly Claudette's entire fortune. Within a month, Claudette's assets were frozen pending payment of the judgment. Her society friends abandoned her. The charity boards she'd served on quietly asked for her resignation. She disappeared from Atlanta entirely, reportedly moving to a small apartment in Florida under an assumed name. David didn't feel sorry for her. Claudette had raised a monster and spent decades protecting that monster from consequences. Now she was facing consequences of her own. 6 months after Amelia's conviction, David finished rebuilding the house on Pine Ridge Road. He'd used the same foundation but designed everything else from scratch. Bigger windows, better security, a safe room hidden behind Lily's closet. Just in case, he told Grady when the old man questioned the expensive security system. "You think she'll come back?" "I think she'll try. Maybe not this year or next year, but someday. And I'll be ready." Lily was doing well in therapy. She still had nightmares sometimes, but they were getting less frequent. She'd returned to kindergarten and made new friends. Her teacher said she was remarkably resilient for a child who'd been through such trauma. Kids bounce back faster than adults, Dr. Patel had explained. Lily knows she's safe now. That's what matters. David wasn't sure he'd ever feel completely safe again. Every stranger who lingered too long near the school, every unexpected phone call, every shadow that moved wrong outside the house, all of it sent his alert system into overdrive. But Lily was home. She was healthy and happy and safe. That was what mattered. Tessa had moved back to the mountains permanently. She'd started a private investigation business, specializing in financial crimes. Her first case was helping another father track down assets his ex-wife had hidden during their divorce. "Turns out I'm good at following money," she told David over dinner one night. "Maybe I should thank Amelia for the career inspiration." Grady had officially retired from his security business, but he spent most days at David's house anyway. He'd installed himself as Lily's unofficial bodyguard and homework supervisor. "Grandpa Grady makes the best grilled cheese," Lily announced one evening, her mouth full of sandwich. "Better than Daddy's?" David asked with mock offense. "Way better. You always burn the edges." David laughed. It was good to hear Lily being a normal 5-year-old again, complaining about burned grilled cheese instead of asking when the bad men were coming back. 1 year after the fire, David sat on his new back porch watching Lily play in the yard. She was chasing fireflies with a mason jar, giggling every time she almost caught one. That Tessa joined him with 2 beers and the comfortable silence of siblings who'd been through hell together. "Any word from the appeals court?" she asked eventually. "Denied. Amelia's staying in prison." "Good." They drank their beers and watched Lily play. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. "Do you ever think about visiting her?" Tessa asked. "Why would I do that? Closure, maybe. Answers." David shook his head. "I have all the answers I need. She's a sociopath who almost destroyed our family for money. There's nothing more to understand. But don't you want to know why? What made her that way?" David looked at his sister. Would it change anything? Would knowing why make Lily's nightmares go away? Would it make the 3 weeks she spent locked in that cabin disappear? No, but then I don't care why. I only care about what she did and making sure she never gets the chance to do it again. Tessa nodded slowly. "So no forgiveness, ever? Forgiveness is for people who feel regret. Amelia doesn't regret anything except getting caught." They sat in silence for a while longer. Lily had caught 2 fireflies and was explaining to them through the glass that she would let them go before bedtime. "She asked me about Mommy yesterday," David said quietly. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That Mommy made some very bad choices and has to live somewhere else now." "How'd she take it?" "She said she was sad, but not surprised. Said she knew Mommy was different after the fire." David finished his beer and stood up. "Lily, time to let the fireflies go." His daughter ran over with her jar. She unscrewed the lid and watched the tiny lights flutter away into the gathering darkness. "They're going home to their families," she said matter-of-factly. "Just like we did," David replied, lifting her into his arms as they walked into the house. Tessa called after them. "David, do you think you'll ever be able to trust anyone again?" David paused in the doorway, Lily warm and solid in his arms. "I trust you. I trust Dad. I trust Deputy Wade and Dr. Patel and Lily's teacher. But romantically, do you think you'll ever want to try again?" David looked down at his daughter, who was falling asleep against his shoulder. "Right now, I have everything I need." He carried Lily inside and tucked her into bed. She mumbled something about fireflies and daddies and being safe at home. David kissed her forehead and turned on her nightlight. From her window, he could see the spot where their old house had burned. The new grass was growing thick and green. Soon, there would be no trace of the fire that had almost destroyed them. But David would remember. He would remember the fear in Lily's voice when she called for help. He would remember the sound of flames eating through their lives. He would remember his wife's face as she lied to destroy him. And he would never, ever forgive, because some things were too broken to fix. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Some people deserved to rot in the cages they'd built for themselves. David turned off Lily's light and when to check the locks on all the doors. Then he'd check them again. Some habits die hard. Some vigilance lasts forever. And sometimes that's exactly how it should be.